What up, and welcome to The Lot. I have a very special guest today. Like all of our guests, I'm incredibly excited to have this conversation. Today's guest is a pretty unique story for The Lot. Our guest today is a vice president of corporate accounts at M Booth, which is really in the top three, mid-sized PR firms. He's handled accounts from everywhere from like American Express to Wild Turkey to Mercedes and GM. He is really somebody that's an expert in the world of PR. And between college and graduate school, he sold cars. So, John McLaughlin, welcome to The Lot. Welcome to The Lot. Real people who took real ups. With almost 2 million people employed by the automotive retail car business, there's a good chance that someone successful got their start selling cars. These are their stories. Welcome to The Lot. Sponsored by AutoFi.
Joe, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh man, I'm so excited to have you. And side note, John McLaughlin is also the best man at my wedding and my best friend of all time. So, John, welcome to The Lot. I'm incredibly excited to have you on here. So, really excited to talk to somebody outside of auto that spent time in auto, right? So tell me, like for all of the listeners that are automotive listeners that are working in dealerships today, what do you do? What does PR mean? Tell me about your job.
Well, first off, I have a lot of respect for the folks on the lots today. You know, that's a tough job. I've been there. There's a lot of growing you can do there. We'll get into that. But today, I really lead a team of really spectacular PR folks, professionals here in New York. We're all a little spread out right now. But we, handle a lot of corporate and B2B marketing accounts. So what that looks like is somebody like American Express. We have handled their Shop Small, the small business Saturday that's coming up in November for the past decade. I've only been doing that for about 8 years. This year is a little different. We're not as involved, but spectacular campaign that really gets people into the doors of small businesses, and has been a lot of fun to work on. A lot of people have misconceptions about public relations. They think advertising, right? Mm-hmm. Advertising's to pay to see something about a brand or a company, right? PR is a way to earn that in a different way. So, one of the biggest things I learned on the car lot, and that I take with me everywhere, is that everything is sales. Everything is sales and business. What we do is not exactly monetary transactions, right? But we transact information. So we push a brand's message, whether it's with media, whether it's with influencers, things like that. And we, earn those column inches. If you turn on CNBC or Bloomberg in the morning and see a CEO, there's a PR person that helps schedule that and coordinate that and make sure that CEO arrived there on time, and had their talking points ready and was able to talk smartly about what's happening in the world. So a little behind the scenes of my world, and it's a lot of fun.
So how did you end up in PR? How did you get into because your background, your college, I know very well because we were roommates for a really long time, but your college and background, so it wasn't necessarily PR. How did you end up in that world?
So sure. Yeah, I went to college for psychology and political science. So understanding both the people and sort of, the world that we live in, the political structures, and no business background whatsoever. So, it was a long journey that brought me to public relations. And, it started in the professional world, in the white collar world, on a car lot. I entered the political consulting space after that, worked for a good number of years around Virginia, Texas, and Oklahoma. And then ultimately, campaigns have a end date. We all saw that earlier this month. And then folks go looking for a job. And I didn't want to work at a state capitol in some suit. So I found a small shop in Oklahoma City that took a chance on me in the public relations space. And then, shortly thereafter, I moved to New York, and another much larger shop took another chance. And here we are today.
Wow. So for me, I think it's super interesting because I do know that there's a lot of people that come out of school with a degree and then they have this really hard time figuring out what they're going to do, right? I got this, psychology degree where what am I going to do? And for you, I think that like a lot of people in the car business, you went into the car business as just something to do until you figured out where you wanted to go. And I think that there's a lot of us that ended up in the car business and loved it and never got out from that. And then there's a lot of people that come into the car business for a year or two, pick up some skills, and then find a path somewhere else that they can apply some of those skills into. Walk me through like that journey for you, right? So you come out of college, you have a roommate that works at a dealership.
Yep.
And
Yeah, and there was a dealership in Tulsa doing some really innovative things and looking for college students, right? Graduates or soon to graduate. I had a few credits left and was going to finish those up, on the side while I was working at the dealership. And they brought on a number of us for a program to really see, can we train college students to, find a process, understand sort of how it all works, get to know the product, and then just start taking ups and figure it out from there. And it was a little bit of a sink or swim, and I sort of bobbled along. There were a few that sunk out pretty quickly, and there were some great swimmers. I remember, I think Kurt worked his way through law school for a good while.
Yeah, I forgot about Kurt, right?
And, Billy, I think, had a great number of years there before he moved on and does some sales in some other areas. So, for me, it was a few months, honestly, but it was challenging, before I came to the dealership. My work experience was really like being told what to do, right? My grandpa ran a plumbing, electric, heating and air, and I was, under, houses and in attics and just doing whatever he told me to do. And then I worked at, conference center in during college, and all that they really needed was me to set up AV. So it was a lot of taking direction. And what I learned at the, as I arrived at the lot is that, you're gonna need to be a little more proactive here. And that was my first experience with that. So it was a really great training program in how to do that. And the person that led that training was you, Joe.
I appreciate that. Thank you. You're like really taking me back, because I think about the group of people that we hired, right? We were actively recruiting, trying to get people that were coming out of college, that were trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And, I think that a lot of times people in dealerships discount what they're learning, right? Like, we talked about this in the last podcast, like your first jobs, the first jobs you have sometimes are like, they're hard. You don't like them. You're like, oh, like, what am I doing in my life? And in those moments, I think there's this learning that's happening that you don't realize is happening. And like, I think about, the first ups I took, right? Like where I can't explain it to people who've never done it. You're like, heart's racing. There's this like 60-year-old guy that's kind of looking at you and looking away, hoping to not make eye contact. And you got to like walk over there and strike up a conversation, and they blatantly don't want to talk to you. And it's a weird place. Like how, like, and
it's really tough. Yeah. And as a shy kid, for me, like doing that, being a bit introverted and trying to put yourself out there and, break down those barriers and understand sort of what obstacles they have to what we were selling on that new car lot, it was really tough. And, I kind of approached it in probably not the best way, but the way I knew. I'm a book smart kind of guy. I did really well in school, so I took all the brochures and I wanted to learn. I wanted to know all the details of each of the vehicles, right? I wanted to know all the trim packages and why one cost more than the other. What was really going to differentiate that, and what was going to work for customers as they came onto the lot. And so I approached it probably a little too technically, and what I learned is that, the guys that were doing the best on the lot, the Rod Rails, and I'm going to forget his name, that came from Lincoln, who, had people coming in asking for them, right? Hey, my friend worked with Rod. Can he help me? I thought I had an up here, and this is Rod's deal from the get-go. That kind of sales, seeing what they did in action to generate that type of business, to hit those 30. Sometimes I think Rod had like a 40 car month, and we're all going nuts for him. I didn't pick it up quick enough, but I saw it in action. I saw what that looked like. And that point in life, you're a little bit like not sure what you want to do.
Yeah.
It was a really challenging time, and unfortunately, for me, I had my few sales here and there, but it wasn't the perfect fit, and it wasn't a great fit for that point in life.
Yeah, and I think that that's okay, right? Like, I think that that's one of the things that, by the way, you're talking about JC, who came over from Lincoln, right?
Yeah,
Hergy.
yeah.
That dude, he's still selling cars, by the way, and he sells from his house. He only goes in the dealership to do deliveries.
That's amazing.
And he like works his phones, and he has a group of customers that only buy from him. He meets them at the dealership to do test drives. So he's like semi-retired, still selling, 10, 15 cars a month, working from home. I think that we have this culture that's obsessed with winning, right? Like, we have this like success culture. When you get on LinkedIn, you see all these people like, you got to get after it and succeed. And I appreciate that.
The hustle culture.
The hustle culture. I need that kick in the ass sometimes, right? Like, I genuinely appreciate that drive. And in Silicon Valley, when I went to work at AutoFi, one of the things that I learned was how valued the idea of failure was there, right? Like, there is a premium placed upon failure. And there's this kind of undercurrent of, you look at all these, these founders of these massive companies that have blown up, and you look, and there's this track record of like getting their ass kicked. Getting their ass kicked over and over and over again, and falling on their face and failing. And every time, I mean, look at like the most notorious, like Steve Jobs, right? I mean, gets fired from Apple and kind of ran out, and like has these down moments and these up moments. And I think we look at these successful people, and all we see is this moment of success, right? And like the stuff that has got me to where I am today, it's not the like high-fiving at the end of a big win. It's like the crumpled in a corner of being like, what am I going to do? Like, it's all falling apart. And I think that the car business actually gives you a good place to do that, right? Like, you are going to, I don't care how good of a salesperson you are going to have months where you fail, right? Like, you are going to have that month where you go, oh, like, I just didn't get it done this month. And it, like, I don't think that we do a good job of celebrating that. One, that's okay. It's like one of my favorite fighters, Conor McGregor, says, right? Like, you win or you learn. And I think that there's this idea that that you always got to be winning. And I love that in your story, your stint in the car business was not a success, right? Like, you were not this great car salesperson that like was like setting the world on fire. You got in there, you got punched in the mouth a bunch, you learned a lot of things, and then you took that and it like pushed you into like finding your path in life. Like, when you and by the way, I think you're the only guest we've had so far that we fired at the dealership, and then I had dinner with that night because you were my roommate, right? Like, like so I think that like when I think about that, you had this moment where you were in this dealership and you were learning, and then when that came to an end, I feel like it pushed you to go figure out what you wanted to do with your life. Walk me, like, I want you to put yourself back into that, like, 22-year-old John's head. Yeah. Where you're like in those moments where you're like walking around downtown Tulsa desolate, like thinking about what you're going to do. Like, how did that help push you to go carve this path that you're still on today?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing was it sort of freed up my time, right? I had was wrapping up college at the same time, finished up at the dealership, i.e. was fired, and so I was sort of drifting a little bit, right? I was waiting tables. I picked up some shifts at a restaurant downtown. I started substitute teaching, which ultimately I went to graduate school to be a teacher. So clearly, a little bit driftless, but that gave me the opportunity. A buddy of mine was working out in Virginia on a political campaign, gave me a ring and said, "Hey, I've got a job for you out here. Are you available?" And yes, I was. And after you've tried to sell a 30, a 40, a $50,000 vehicle, a very high stakes sales process, and been told no multiple times, or maybe not today, or maybe tomorrow, or I'm going to go down the street and get it for cheaper. You build a little bit of a thick skin. That's a lot more high stakes than asking somebody for their vote.
Yeah.
So when I was knocking doors and cold calling, for political campaigns, it felt very easy to be told, no, because I'd been told that, at the dealership a good more numbers of times than I'd like to admit.
Dude, I think that is a massive point. Like, I think that, so, I train jiu-jitsu, right? And it's incredibly humbling because you get tapped out a lot, right? Like, you show up and you're like, oh, I'm pretty tough, right? Like, it's this, and I think that the car business in some ways is very similar, right? Like, you're going to get told, if you were closing at 20%, right? That means 8 out of 10 of your customers are going to tell you no. They're going to ghost you. They're going to not respond. They're going to show up and show you the car they bought down the street for $100 cheaper, right? Like, there's this block, and it's going to hurt. And I think that those reps of getting that done builds up some toughness that I think is it's an underappreciated like value set that the car business actually imparts in people. And you said something a moment ago I want to go back to, which is this idea of being rudderless, right? And I know a lot of young people that today with COVID, with what's going on, feel incredibly rudderless, right? Like, man, if you graduated college a year ago or 2 years ago, like, this is a weird world to be stepping into.
Very.
And I think that sometimes those rudderless moments can feel so overwhelming. But I also think that those are the moments that when I look at people's lives, including my own, right? When, they're selling the dealership that I was running and I don't know what I'm going to do. Those moments of rudderlessness lead you to this next adventure, right? Talk to me now. You're out in Virginia. You're working this political campaign. You decide to go to graduate school. So walk me through like graduate school and then becoming getting out of that and going into PR.
Yeah. And I think what you'll see with my journey is like, I grew up in a small town. I graduated with 92 people.
Yeah. Perry, Oklahoma.
5,000 folks. Shout out to P-Town.
Yeah.
And, Tulsa was my first big city outside.
Tulsa's a huge metropolitan area, but it was the
huge
epicenter of culture in the U.S.
It sure is. And then, I made my way to Virginia, and we were a small town out there where we worked, but, I got exposed to even more there on the East Coast and found, William & Mary to be just a beautiful campus that I wanted to attend. So again, it was sort of this falling back on the books. What can I, play to my strengths here? And I went to graduate school. It was a 18-month program. It was quick, and had just learned so much about, it was teaching program, curriculum, instruction. How do you present information to high schoolers, essentially, and in a way that's engaging? And there's a lot that I learned there that I apply in the professional world now. But very quickly after that, there's a lot of red tape involved in teaching and not a lot of money. And I ended up back in political campaigns. I started my own consulting firm with a friend, and we did that for a couple of years, a couple of big cycles, and handled a lot of elections. Won and lost a lot of races. And that was such a big part of everything. Just starting to explore everything. And I think, Tulsa gave me that opportunity, the dealership. I look back and there's so little that I knew about, the car buying process, like people coming in and what was it that they needed for their day to day. I'm a small town guy. I'd been to college. I didn't understand, people really, really working and taking care of their family. And so I never had a chance to really connect with those folks. In a way that would have worked. I think I'd be a much better sales guy today, Joe.
So when I think back to the time that we were, on the lot together, like, what did you like about it? Like, what did you like about selling cars?
Yeah. Everybody around. It was just such a great team, and we still talk about those guys. The Jerry's, those guys of the world. Buck was such a good influence on me. And then that cohort that we came in with, that was really enjoyable to see them as their lives as well. I hope you'll have some of them on the show. So that was a big part of it. And then I think just the opportunity. I'm so grateful that you guys offered that. I really enjoyed seeing like those folks who really did it. And setting you down with this was my favorite, setting me down with a call sheet, basically, a stack of paper of folks who hadn't been to the dealership in 7 years, but had had bought, a truck or something
Mm-hmm.
7 years ago and saying, hey, ring them up and see if they want an oil change and want to come check out the new line. And, at that point, I realized it was a numbers game.
Yep.
It was how many people can I ring, get told no by. But, every 100th call, maybe somebody would say, oh, yeah, I haven't been back and have been meaning to check out the new Tundra.
Yeah.
Or, that I heard you guys have that FJ.
Yeah.
Like, you have one on the lot. Yes, we do. Come on down.
Oh man, you said something that like really rings with me. So when I got out of retail, I think the one thing that I probably miss the most is the crew. Like I'm one of those people that like I exist in a crew. Like, and we had a very tight knit crew there. I mean, Chris Martinez that was on here was introduced to me by Mike David, who worked in F&I when you were selling cars and I was on the desk, right? Like we're all, I mean, here in Tulsa, you've got like, Chris Mathern, who was doing F&I, is an insurance guy. Brian, B Smooth is an insurance guy. Brian Smith, we all call him B Smooth. Mike David is a mortgage broker. You've got, Dustin Mosley is selling houses. So there's like this, like they just all moved into real estate and insurance and all kind of still work together. And it makes me super happy because, I think that's part of it too. Like you pick up these closes and these angles and these like ways from watching everybody around you and seeing like what works and what doesn't work, and it's interesting to me because I do think that those skills translate to other things, right? In your job, you're talking to clients, you're pitching ideas, you're selling information. Tell me like how what you learned doing that has translated into what you do today.
Oh, so many ways. You mentioned I've had some automotive clients in the past, and it's fairly rare that somebody has on the lot car sales experience that walks into a pitch room to pitch sort of the management of a Mercedes-Benz, of a GM, and so that in and of itself just lends a lot of credibility, being that really the bottom of the funnel, the buying process, right? Whereas what we work at the top, the brand and awareness level. So just having that full sort of funnel experience is a real value add walking into those rooms, and so that's really direct, but every day we are talking with media, so we're pitching stories, and it's a lot of it's done by email these days, but the good folks, the ones that really land great stories, do it over the phone, right? They pick up the phone, just like if you're trying to get that 7-year
buyer back
truck,
into the dealership,
buyer back on the lot. It's the same thing. It's not, hey, am I interrupting you right now? Of course you're interrupting them right now. It's like, hey, let me steal 5 minutes of your time. I've got this great story that you're going to be interested in, and nail it in 2 sentences, right?
Get
and
that
if they hang
elevator
up,
pitch.
then at least you got it in. But in a lot of them do. They say, yeah, I am busy.
If you were talking to a room full of 22-year-olds that were 23-year-olds or 25-year-olds or 35-year-olds or whatever it is, that were rudderless and thinking about getting into the car business, even if I feel like most people in the car business got into the car business like, oh, I'll just do this until I find a real job, right? And then some of them go, wow, like I'm crushing it here, and some of them go, okay, figure some stuff out. Now this opportunity's come. Like you see, I mean, our turnover rate for salespeople is like 80-something% right now, right?
It's high.
So if you were talking to a room full of rudderless, 25-year-olds, and they were thinking about the car business, what would you tell them?
I'd say definitely check it out. It takes a certain type of personality, but anybody can learn from it, right? And if a dealership and if they're willing to take a chance, you're going to learn professionalism. You're going to see, the way that work really gets done. Because so much of car sales, right, happens after work hours. People come in at the end of the day or on Saturdays. Saturdays are huge, right? Or states where it's open on Sundays. Those are big days, and most people don't know, like the regular working world, the 9 to 5s. They don't know they don't see the amount of effort that goes into that. So it's great to see as a college student sort of how all of that's going to work and how you're going to fill your time in those slower periods.
Yeah,
right? And be productive. Like that was the biggest learning for me, was you can't just go sit in a car if you're ever going to sell something and like wait for the ups to come.
Yeah.
Right? The up bus.
The up bus doesn't show up, right? Right. Just waiting on the up bus, boss. I think that's the other thing that I feel like it did for me, right? Like, you know what I was like in college. You know what I was like after college. like focus and, staying focused and working hard for long extended periods of time has never been my strongest. I'm like a sprinter, like give me bursts of energy. And I feel like at the dealership, and I hate to use this term, but it taught me how to grind, right? Like it taught me how to like show up and spend all day working. And, I can think of multiple times when it was end of the month and, me and Jerry and Robert are trying to get those last 3 car deals so that we can hit that objective beyond the GST objective so that we get our bonus, and I'm blowing up the phones and we're out, and and it's, it's 7:00 and we've got till 10 before we got to punch these cars. And, I know Jerry's probably sandbagging 1 or 2, so we probably only need, 1 or 2, but we're still going for 3 to give us some leeway. And, you have these moments where it's, you're on your 87th hour that week, and it's because it's the last week of the month. And it taught me, almost like this ability to push myself and do things I didn't want to do. And I think that's what, and I think you don't have to be in the car business to learn that. I think you learn that waiting tables. You can learn that like in a lot of places, but I think it's something that for people early in their career, that we underappreciate the value of it teaching us, right? Like I joke about college. It wasn't the subject matters that I was learning in college that I feel like were really important. It was the being up at 3 a.m. trying to finish this damn project so I can turn it in with 2 other people. And we're like banging our heads against the wall and they're ready to call it quits. And it's a C paper right now. And I need it to be an A paper so I can get that GPA, right? Like, and you just like grit your teeth and bite down on the mouthpiece and keep hammering at it. Like that's what I feel like college taught me. And then the car business reinforced that in the professional world. And I learned a lot from watching the people around me, right? And what did you hate about selling cars? Like what was the part like what did you just, oh God, this was awful.
Man. Sitting down with the pencil, I think was not easy for me. Making that ask, giving them that moment to respond, knowing sort of having that skepticism overall. Again, I'd never been in that. In that situation, it's so difficult, and that's such a high stakes. It's that personal balance sheet that you're asking them to turn over, right? And so I think I carried a lot of empathy into those, and it didn't really serve me well. And I think looking back, one of the learnings I didn't realize at the time was that it's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
I think we always joke ripping lips or, stickering them or whatever, like terrible jokes.
Oh, God. Hearing you say that just makes my stomach hurt. Like it's just so
exactly. It was, 13 to 14 years ago, that was the lot culture a little bit. And it was joking, but it felt, it didn't feel great, it felt very
zero sum, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not a zero-sum game. I look back and I think, one of my favorite car sales, and the one that I feel is my favorite because I learned so much. It's also one of the, the toughest for me. We had a guy come to the lot, working guy, trying to get his family around town, and wanted to get into a Corolla. Found him one real reasonable price, went into F&I and washed out, right? Couldn't qualify.
Yeah.
And so we walked over to the used car lot. We hit the back fence where, we didn't carry a lot of low price vehicles, but, there was one back there that was about maybe a third of a Corolla even. And he bought it at sticker. He didn't even ask for a discount.
Yeah.
And I was glad to get him into a vehicle, but that there's so much more markup over there than there even was I made more on that than I would have on the Corolla.
Yeah.
And when you take that to heart and you feel bad about that, like that's where I think I struggled.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize is that that guy, has a car, he can get his family around.
Yeah.
He paid a fair price for it. It's not, we didn't take advantage of him.
Yeah.
And so, it was a plus sum, and I appreciate people, and I try to take this when I go car shopping, which I've been doing for the first time in about 10 years recently, and is come to the lot with a little bit of empathy for your car salesman.
Yeah.
Right? They're trying to make a living and take care of their family, and they're not going to make a ton of money off of your one sale, but they're in this to make a little bit of money, and that's the way the system's set up, and it's not a bad system.
Yeah, I think that for some reason in the car business, we like the customers and the salespeople a lot of times feel like profit is a dirty word, right? Like making a It's not about the profit. It's about the price to market. And, like that customer buying that car was probably like knowing the way that we priced our used cars at that dealership, knowing what was on that back lot, they were priced to market. Like that was a good deal. Like if they paid full stick for that car, it was a fair and square deal. And, I think about that all the time. Like we forget the win-wins that are available. And I love Simon Sinek and that book, The Infinite Game, right? Like we constantly get ourselves trapped in this zero-sum idea of for me to win, you have to lose. And in that scenario, that was a customer that and I'll tell you this, there's a lot of people at a lot of dealerships and a lot of new salespeople, a lot of old salespeople that when they were done with that Corolla deal, they probably would just let that guy go home and like, all right, fine, like this guy can't qualify. I'm gonna go get me another one. And you did a service by that person by saying, okay, well, let's find a way to help you get transportation, right? You've got to get back and forth to work. You've got to get these, kids around town. Let's work together to find a solution here. And I think that if you learn that in the car business, that applies everywhere, right? Whether you're a software company or a PR firm or, like whatever it is, like that idea to me is a bedrock idea of good business. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think, car sales guys or car sales people, men and women, get a bad rap. There's a lot of stereotypes about them out there. Yeah. And the same is true for PR people. We're, spin machines, we're publicists, hype people. It's not as negative, but it's not always positive. And so I carry that with me here as well. And I recognize that what I do carries a lot of value, and I should have recognized that back then.
This podcast for me is a little bit about exposing the like silent car salespeople, right? Like the people at all these levels are like, okay, yeah, back when like I was talking to, another guest I'm going to have who's at Google. I was like, look, when I got out of college, I started selling cars at this Pontiac dealership because I didn't know what I was going to do in my life. I was like, there are hundreds of you. And I think that like, I've worked in this business my whole life, right? Like my mom was a service writer. My dad was an F&I manager. That's how they met. Like I grew up around car people, and
it's in your DNA, Joe.
It's like oddly, I have a mustache. Like it's oddly woven into who I am as a human being. And I think about this all the time. Like there is such a negative stereotype around salespeople, and specifically car salespeople, right? Like I think of Danny DeVito in Matilda, right? Like it's this caricature of just like horribleness.
And the mustaches and the pinky rings, right?
Yeah, and the like cigarette and the paper stuffed in the pocket and the plaid jacket. And like, I get that archetype caricature, and I get where it comes from. And there's a lot of bad salespeople out there. There's a lot of cheesy salespeople out there. But man, like John, I know so many people that work selling cars or work the desk that would take a punch for me, right? Like I could leave my wallet with them and know when I came back, it would be exactly how, that are salt of the earth. I can think about like things that happened to me when I was working at the dealership and the crew of people that supported me through it, right? I can think of things, people in the hospital or having a baby and everybody from the dealership, like picking up Chick-fil-A and taking it up there for them. And like, it in some ways breaks my heart because I think that it disincentivizes people from doing it. And I think that we need good people to work the floor and work the desk. And I think about, you've mentioned multiple people that shaped your career and your life, right? I talk about Jerry all the time. Like that, I moved to where I moved because that like old school hard ass put his arm around me and like cared enough about me to like, kick me in the butt to make me like, I remember this one time I was late and he's like yelling at me. He's like, what time is it? I was like, oh, it's 9:07. He's like, okay, so is it 9? I'm like, no, it's 9:07. He's like, okay, well, what time are you supposed to be here? 9. I'm like, he's like, exactly. He starts yelling at me. I was like, it won't happen again. I can remember like, you're damn right it won't happen again because the next time it happens, you won't have a job. And I wasn't late again. And since that moment, like I've been very like, I hate being late. Like and then, after he calmed down, after he was in the smoke hole for a few minutes and calmed down, he came back and he's like, look, when you're late, it shows disrespect to everybody else at this dealership, to me, to the salespeople. And you're telling them that I don't value you enough to be here when I say I'm going to be here. And it's a call out on your integrity. And I was like, oh, I've never thought about it like that. And then I'm like, now I went from like being mad that I'm getting yelled at to feeling like I let my pops down.
Exactly.
And so then for me, like it's made me better at what I do in life. And I impart that same lesson with my girls. This morning I was yelling at them to get into the car to get to school on time. I was like, it's disrespectful to your teachers. It's disrespectful to your classmates, right? So man, like this is for me, it's so interesting to hear about why do you think, and we'll wrap up here soon, but why do you think that people don't publicly talk about being in the car business, right? Like, and I think that like I kind of have an idea why, but give me your take on it, right? Like, do people
sure,
that you work with?
I've got an example real recently of, I mentioned the fact that I did work at a dealership recently in a team call, and our intern side messaged me and he said, I had no idea you worked at a dealership. So did I. Yeah. Kind of came out like that wasn't on his resume, right? Like it wasn't part of his spiel when he got hired. But why not? Like I would have recognized that as, if you could last, a year or two on a lot, like you've got some great skills that are actually going to apply in this industry and almost all industries. I mean, most industries, right?
Dude, I've noticed that lately, like the resume scrubbing, right? Yep. Where it's like, okay, we can only have one page. So all we've got is our like high level professional experience. And you're like, I feel like some of that early job experience, it needs to be on the resume. Now there's a lot of people that disagree with me and I get it, right? But like, you waited tables for 3 years while you were going through college. I know something about you, right? Like you worked at a dealership for 4 years while you were in college, and after college, you got out of college, worked at a dealership for 5 years and sold cars and became an internet manager. I know something about you, right? Like
it says a lot about a person.
Yeah, and we have gotten to where it's like, no, it just needs to be this high level professional
the internship and the last couple jobs.
I want to see some gritty resumes. That's my new call. I want grit resumes. I want to hear like, oh man, I dug ditches during the summer, or like I hauled produce, right? Like
cleaning sewers.
Yeah, man.
Let's see
I'm in.
Work. But yeah, so I think there's so much experience that gets a little bit hidden away that could if framed right, and that's what it's all about in those job interviews and on those resumes, is telling that story in a way that those skills immediately become applicable to what they're doing.
Any final thoughts? Anything you want to tell people? Like what's going on? What's next in your life? Like you're at M Booth, you're loving PR, you're gonna just keep.
Yeah. You're raising chickens, living the country life.
Yeah, wait. So you're not in Brooklyn anymore. You guys are. No. You're actually in like your country house in upstate, right?
We moved up here in March when things kind of hit the fan, and finding our way through remote work. So many people right now, and just wanting this economy to stabilize, and get through this virus so that we can all sort of get some semblance of normalcy back.
Yeah, I'm so ready to see people. Like I'm so ready. Like I want to be in a crowd.
We don't have to do this over Zoom.
Yeah, man. Like here's what I want to be in a crowd. Like all I want is to be at a convention that I used to complain about. I used to complain about. Oh, I got to be at this convention all weekend and shake hands and what. I want to be in a convention, man. Like that's what I want in life.
Or the car shows, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
Missing those things.
Yeah, man. Well, dude, hey. It's good seeing you, man. Like
it's great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Like this is John McLaughlin. Like I think we lived together for like 6 years. Like we were college roommates through tons of stuff. He's seen me at my best, seen me at my worst. We worked at a dealership together. I think I hired him through a college recruiting program, and I'm really proud of what you've done with your life, man. Like you are. Hopefully there's some. I hope there's some like 23-year-old rudderless kid at a dealership somewhere who's trying to find their way, and hearing you talk gives them hope that no matter where this crazy car business journey takes them, it can end up in some really awesome places. So, John, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Man.
Hey, thank you. And thank you to Mark and everyone that took the chance on a bunch of college kids back in, the late 2000s.
Yeah, man. It was a crazy time. It was a lot of those guys, a lot of those people, right, are still killing it. And, I'm really excited that I got to be a part of it. It was a really fun adventure for me. So
hey, keep on innovating, Joe.
I appreciate it, man. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Put your hands together, even though you're not really having hands because you're listening to a podcast like in your car on the way to work or something, for the one and only John McLaughlin, Vice President, Corporate Accounts at M Booth, my dear friend, former car salesperson, and all-around incredible human. John, thanks for joining us on The Lot. This episode of The Lot is brought to you by AutoFi. AutoFi is an e-commerce software platform that allows car buyers, for the first time, to purchase and finance a car entirely online. AutoFi's platform connects an auto dealer's customers to a network of lenders, providing a fast, mobile-first checkout experience. To schedule a demo, go to autofi.com. You've been listening to The Lot. Real stories of real people who took real ups. Join us as we continue the adventure on The Lot.